Jeffrey Clayton is his name. Jeffrey Clayton is the executive director of the American Bail Coalition. And we've all been following, certainly as Minnesotans, the Minnesota Freedom Fund that raised all that money to pay the bail for George Floyd rioters. And I was in Las Vegas, as you remember, a week or two ago, and it was big news there about how a Las Vegas guy was bailed out, and or a guy was bailed out, and he tried to murder a Las Vegas guy. And wait a minute here, how did he get out? He was a terrible felon, should never have been out of jail, was unable to post his own bail, but some group put it up for him. How dangerous is this to public safety? And also, well, if you're too poor to afford bail, well, what is the right solution? Jeffrey Clayton, welcome to Ox in the Afternoon, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, the big one is, of course, we're all too familiar with that here in Minnesota, how these charitable bail funds can release criminals when they shouldn't be released. Kind of give me the rundown on that. This apparently is not just in Minnesota or Las Vegas. It's nationwide.
It is, and after the unfortunate George Floyd incident, they raised roughly $100 million nationally to be bailing some folks out. And as you pointed out in the intro, they didn't bail out too many peaceful protesters. And in fact, in Minneapolis, we were able to identify 12, which that story ran in the Washington Post. So they were using the money for all kinds of other purposes. And we don't think in Minnesota or states that require bail by sufficient sureties that they are a sufficient surety, and that the state really needs to look at why they're allowing this to happen. So let's talk about that. One of the things that I've understood about bail, right, is that it's a way to have skin in the game so that you don't flee, right? Well, if somebody else is paying it for you, you don't even know who they are, that kind of takes that away, doesn't it? It does, and there's a law review article that says that. It says that the funding from crowdsourced bail is too remote. The incentives break down, and thus it's insufficient as a matter of law. And we've made that argument in Minnesota only to be rejected, but we think it's an important concept that if you're going to have charitable bail, you need to do what other states have done, which is regulate it and limit it to certain classes or acts of cases.
Oh, expound upon that for me. Like what?
Well, for example, in New York, you can only post charitable bail for misdemeanors, bails of $2,000 or less. And the reason for that is that what charitable bail was created to do was to get people out on these low-level charges where it truly was an economic issue. And it wasn't as much related to a person that had all kinds of prior crimes, like the guy in Las Vegas who had, numerous prior felony cases, had just been illegally possessing a gun. That's not what it was designed for. So other states that have implemented bills have limited the class of cases that charitable bail organizations can bail out.
How do you feel about that? Does that make sense?
I think so. And the real problem here is it's a game of Russian roulette. The Minnesota Freedom Fund and the Las Vegas Freedom Fund have said they don't look at prior criminal acts or prior failures to appear in court. And that's what predicts. So when they say that they don't do that, they just look at social justice factors, they're going to make mistakes, and that's what we're seeing right now.
So are these – now this was a big deal. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Kamala Harris was talking about it, some prominent lawmakers, some prominent celebrities, Seth Rogen, I think, and others. I don't know. Has this kind of waned a little bit now? Are people seeing the light, or is this proliferating?
I don't know. I think it was big after certainly the protest period of a couple of years ago, and Kamala Harris and definitely Hollywood stars are involved. But I'm on their email list too, and they're continuing to fundraise for fighting the system.
They are. Wow. All right. Well, let's talk about then what's. I mean, is it legitimate to? Are there claims legitimate to say that, well, only rich people can afford bail, so this is, unfairly targeting poor people, and is there some sort of a social concern here that needs to be remedied?
Well, there's probably some social concern. Perhaps we have inadequate due process. We've seen a lot of states where somebody gets locked up and they don't realize that they have to go ask a judge to reduce their bail. We've seen the overuse of some bail in some of these low-level
cases around the state. So there is some sort of a social justice concern there that I think, is worthy of being looked at. But what the Bail Project is doing is just ridiculous. And it's circuitous logic that if I had the money, I could afford it. We could say that about every bail, but that's not what judges are looking at. They're looking at the fact that the average defendant who doesn't post bail typically has between 10 and 12 prior strikes against them. That's what they're looking at. And that's a combination of prior bad acts and convictions, prior arrests, and prior failures to appear in court. And so, that's just how our system of bail works in this country, that everybody has a right to bail, and the judges have to get to a number that they think is reasonable.
Aha. So what you're saying is that when we hear somebody, they unfairly set bail at, the $10,000, he can't afford that, therefore we should pitch in and help him. We don't know that he hadn't posted a lesser bail for other crimes before and then violated the conditions of it?
That's right. You don't know anything, and that's what these funds have admitted in the Wall Street Journal, that they don't check and see what the history of this guy is in the Las Vegas case. They didn't even bother to check his criminal record. They didn't check to see if he showed up for court, and so that's dangerous. I mean, it's one thing to make a close call and bail somebody out when they go commit a new crime. It's another to entirely ignore their past and just base it on whatever social justice factors you feel are important.
So advocating for something on this would be what, to get states to have these criteria for who is eligible for charitable bail?
Absolutely. We're watching a case in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit where the Bail Project has sued the Indiana Commissioner of Insurance to say that what they're doing is protected speech, and it can't be regulated by the Department of Insurance, even though bail bondsmen and insurance companies that I represented are regulated in 47 states in U.S. territories. But they feel what they're doing is protected speech. So we'll wait to hear the outcome of that one.
Just out of curiosity, I'm not real familiar. I've not been involved, God willing, never have, knock on wood, whatever, in any kind of a bail situation, having to post it or having anybody needing money for bail. We do our headquarters here for the broadcast headquarters in downtown St. Cloud, Minnesota, is Courthouse Central. So you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a bail bonds house. So I'm familiar with the clientele and that it's big business. But so if somebody posts bail, how much of that do they get back then, right? If they end up, actually going to court and whatnot, what happens to that money?
Right. If you post your own bail, and I don't know what the rule is in Minnesota, but you get it back if you show up for court. In a lot of states, they just keep it for fines and fees if you plead guilty. If you use a bail bondsman or you have a third party post their money, the third party typically will get all their money back if the person appears, so they have an incentive. And then if you use a bail agent, they require a 10% fee of the amount of the bond, which you do not get back, but you don't have to put up any more money, and that money is not subject to collections. So that's kind of how it works. And the bail bondsman, or the third party, if the person fails to appear, is on the hook for the entire amount of the bond.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if the perp, if you will, who posted the bail or had somebody post the bails and doesn't show up, then what? The bail bondsman sends people out to break his kneecaps or find him in Costa Rica or something.
Well, we try not to do that. That's step one, is to try to talk them off the cliff and try to get them back on track, which is a lot of them.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's Dog the Bounty Hunter is a real guy, and did bail enforcement, and we have sophisticated bail enforcement agents throughout the country that work not only across state lines but overseas as well.
So, kind of just wrapping up the idea of these charitable bail organizations, bad. We shouldn't contribute to them.
Well, at this point, I think I would be careful about contributing to the Bail Project. They know that they have a problem, that they're not looking at criminal records of these people. They're not looking at their priors. And thus, like I said, I think it's a game of Russian roulette. They need to tighten up their procedures if they're going to continue to move forward.
Jeez. American Bail Coalition website, ambailcoalition.org. Executive Director Jeffrey Clayton. Appreciate the info very much. Very timely.
Thanks for having me on.
If thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And boy, I tell you, in Minnesota here, I mean, just look at what happened. I mean, these thugs. If somebody's paying your bail, what? You got 5 priors? For sure, you're going down for 3 to 5 or 5 to 7. I don't know. Somebody else pays your bail. Why bother showing up for court? What a ridiculous thing.